Thank you all for joining us today. We're going to get right into it. Last year, the United Nations made the grim projection that based on current rates of change, it will take women 140 years to be represented equally in positions of power and in the workplace. How do we accelerate that transition here in Africa? And Ellen, I think we should start with you.
I think we have to change the attitudes of men. So that men see women as equal partners, able to work with them to be able to achieve national and international goals. Second point is to increase the self-confidence of women so that they're able to determine their goals and are willing to take that journey and face those obstacles. And the third thing is collective action. All women must come together to be able to promote gender equity, equality, opportunities for everyone. Those, I think, are what help us to be able to ensure. And first of all, I don't believe that. I don't believe it's going to take 140 years to get gender equity. Much progress has been made. We've faced some pushback, we know that. But I think generally, if you look around on the global architecture, you'll see that women have made much progress. And we have to celebrate the women who have been able to do that.
So solidarity and confidence, I like that. Sindy, leadership isn't always about positions of power. In many parts of Africa, rural women face unique challenges when it comes to accessing these opportunities. How do you, in your position, address the specific needs of these women?
Thank you so much for that question. As Madam President said, it's all about the narrative. So when we talk about actually women living in the rural areas, these are the narratives that we have to change, the biases, the traditional norms. What are we understanding about this type of demographic that lives in the rural areas? But more so in Africa, we need to invest, make sure that there is edible investment in women that live in the rural areas. We should improve more on the dialect of it. They cannot continue being conferences and sit-downs without action. So we need to implement. We need to make sure there's impact. But we also need to ensure that as women, we are stepping up and putting our foot forward to support other women. I am on the stage because Madam President paved the way for Danai and I to be here. And that's exactly what we need to do. And I think that's where it starts from. In my organization, we've made it intentional to ensure that we work grassroots, on the very grassroots level with the very women that might not be visible to the regular person in the urban areas. Yeah.
So reaching out to everybody is the essential part, going far and wide. And Danai, a lot of your plays and your roles are about powerful, strong women. How do the arts open the door for change?
Yeah, I mean, it's very surreal to be sitting next to Madam President Sirleaf Johnson, because the play that connects mostly with the issues that I hold very dear was the play about women in Liberia during the war there, and ending in 2003, in that moment, and then the triumph of her coming to power and having the first woman head of state on the continent, which meant so much to myself and those other Black African women around me, to have that as a precedent. And a precedent is so important. The aspect of narrative is so connected to that, because when being Zimbabwean and also being American, I am always witnessing a very problematic aspect of how we are viewed by the West, how we are perceived, and how that can often affect our own perceptions, because the West has such a hegemonical role in our culture, in our mindsets, in economics. So many aspects of life are affected by Western perception. And so how we penetrate that perception directly affects us and directly gives us more confidence in who we are and in what we have to say to the world. So I was shocked, the aspect of, say, a narrative like Black Panther, by how much playing a woman general affected people I met on the continent. And that to me also made it even more of a glaring, obvious thing. Just Africans feeling very empowered by Wakanda was a very shocking, it was shocking by how effective it was. It affected us, it affected Americans, it affected Westerner people, it affected people in Asia. People are now dressing up as these African characters, celebrating that culture. And to me, that is a very important aspect of our confidence. I sat down with a group of women, young women, but probably in their 20s, all in their 20s, early 20s. A friend of mine, I think he's sitting right there, Frederick Swaniker, has a school called ALU. And I sat down with them in Rwanda, African Leadership University, here in Rwanda in September. And their issue, they had the confidence, but it's true, they were not surrounded by enough of a narrative that made them feel, that they were supported in what their ambitions were. And that whole aspect of the men and how they still deal with, if they speak out, they're being countered by a male perspective that says, oh, you're being, that mocks them for being feminist. There's like a mockery around a perception of having power in your voice as a woman. And so that type of mindset, I think narrative, when I seeing the effects of even the Wakanda stories, I truly do believe narrative is important to start to break that stuff down for ourselves and for the Western perception of who we are.
So we need to imagine the future we want to see. That's what art gives us.
Say that again?
We need to imagine the future that we want to see, and that's where art steps in.
And we need to have ownership over our own narratives. I've had people come to me and they want to tell a story from the African perspective, but they want to do it in a way that pleases the West. They want to tell a story like this one, like that, like how the West did that, and how they told that story, and the heist, or the police procedural, or we have our own paradigms, and we have to embody our own paradigms and make sure that the world sees them and have an unapologetic expression of self. That's when we get heard and when they hear ourselves.
Changing the narrative is probably the most important part, but it's also the most difficult. How do you grasp that and how do you force that in any of your roles? Why don't you start, Sindy?
Enforcing the narrative, meaning that basically in my own position means that I step up. And I always say to the people around me, our limits are self-imposed, because once you change the self-imposed limits that you have, you know that you can overcome anything. For many people who know about my story, I was homeless for quite a few of time. I lived on the streets of New York City. I lived on the subways. There's nothing remarkable about that, but what's remarkable is the narrative that I brought onto myself is what made sure that I paved the way and moved forward in whatever I thought. And in doing that, I wanted to ensure that no one else, regardless of your background, whether you're defined as African or a woman or anything like that, you own your story. I knew that from what was taking place in my life at that time, there were people that came around me, especially women, which is why I'm so passionate with the work that I do. I work a lot with women so that we can change that narrative about ourselves, to say as women, we believe that we do not support each other. People are telling stories about women to say women cannot work with each other. But no, that's not the case. We can, and we're enabled. We can lead. We're sitting right here because of collaboration and so on. So we can go on and continue talking about what are some of the barriers that don't propel women or just don't propel us as a society in Africa or beyond Africa. But honestly, it starts in your mindset. When you don't impose limits on yourself, you're able to achieve anything. And that's the narrative that we're putting in all the work that we're doing at Southern Africa Embrace Foundation across the continent. When we go to the very grassroots communities of the very marginalized that you can't even imagine of coming across, we speak to them first about the narrative of what are they telling to the world, the confidence that Madam President spoke about, and that's where we start from.
And I think part of that also means seeing what you want, so mentorship.
Absolutely.
Ellen, why don't you talk a little bit about the work you have done with finding mentorship and mentoring the next generation of African leaders, or African women leaders, I should say.
I've dedicated the rest of my life to working for the promotion of women in higher positions of leadership in Africa and across the world, using the examples of women who have challenged, who have, if I may use your word, unapologetically sought higher positions of power, who have had the confidence to determine what goals they want to pursue, and the courage to be able to do it, to lead and to take action wherever, and challenge anything that stops it. And so I've established a center for women in development whose objective is to identify those young women, particularly in Africa, who have already shown that they have a path toward a higher position of leadership in their countries, that they're prepared to move along their journey and to overcome any possible obstacles. And what we do is to show them the examples of those who have already achieved so much. And we have so many women in all the countries of Africa. You can identify so many of them that have also challenged, that have also achieved leadership roles in their areas of endeavor. And to use those as the example, as the role model that all these women can use. And I must say that so many of these women, former women presidents, as few as they are, but also those that are heading international bodies like the WTO, like the ECA, to be able to use their examples. Those women who set themselves up as being the ones to be able to confront the obstacles, to be able to achieve. And my center already has about 42 women, and we've identified in 19 African countries that are pursuing their journeys with difficulties, of course. But I think that they're determined to overcome, they're determined to be it, and we see record. And let me say one word about that to Rwanda, which has achieved so much in the women representation in parliament, having the highest in the world, not just in Africa. And there's so many other countries in our African countries that are close to being 50. And those are all the ones that have examples of strong women that have chosen their path and that have stayed the course to achieve their goals with mentoring from other women who have already achieved higher positions, willing to counsel them, to guide them, to advise them, to provide them the examples that they need for them to continue to work. And so let us all, we celebrate that, and we want to see. My center would like to work with others. The African Women Leaders Network have chapters in all the countries. They're pursuing common objectives. We're looking for all other groupings that have the same goals in mind, that if we come together collectively, we can make such a big push so that prediction, in a short while, we can say that prediction is now dead. And we have a new one that shows a much more positive result from women leadership throughout Africa and the world.
We all want a positive story for women and in Africa, but we don't always get what we want. Danai, through your organization, Love Our Girls, and as the UN Women's Goodwill Ambassador, you're probably the most aware of the many injustices that women and girls face on a daily basis here. What gives you hope and staves off frustration?
It's truly when you, I mean, the aspect of Love Our Girls is really, it's to advocate for, it's actually to grow advocates. It's to grow activists. It's to have people understand, like, this is what's going on. These are the champions who are battling against these things, and they deserve to be celebrated and supported. And maybe you don't know the statistics and the facts about what women deal with, and maybe you don't know their story. And here's a way for you to get access to it. So that's what Love Our Girls does. It's to celebrate the work that's being done right on the ground in these intricate ways that really pushes the needle forward. And so yeah, what I found is that is really very much a way of, you know, you see these, what I've seen that's very beautiful is how many women, just in this year alone, the amount of astounding young women I have met. I was just at the Gates Foundation's Goalkeepers, and I just presented an award to a 24-year-old Cameroonian woman who is doing amazing work in midwifery and addressing the issues of maternal health, post and prenatal health, and, you know, all birth care, et cetera. And she's done so much for so many women in the region that she is now being celebrated in this way. 24 years old. I met another woman, Rwandan. I've met her a few times, and she's an environmentalist. And I saw her this year at the Global Citizen concert. Actually, I saw her also here at the gorilla naming, but I saw her in the United States, and I saw her in Paris. She's everywhere, and she is at the Global Citizen concerts, and she is an environmentalist who is really fighting for the developing countries to the fact that they are dealing with the worst effects of climate change, but the Western world is the one creating the most climate change issues. And for that to be an accountability that is held, she's got a massive petition going, and she's a massive advocate. You see her everywhere now. And then of course the women I met from across the continent when I was here in September, they, you know, from everywhere, from Zimbabwe to Rwanda to Ghana, and they're very clear on the problems that they want to solve. And, you know, as ALU talks about, what's the problem, what's your mission? So they have a mission and they know the problems. These are the women whose voices we seek to amplify, because honestly, the answers are in their bosom. Like, you know, people want to say, oh, let's go talk to, you know, some big fancy institution in the West. Let's go talk to, you know, it's like, no. The answers are with the women who are on the continent. They know the issues, they've seen the worst of it, and they know how to fix it. And if we continue to amplify them, we'll get somewhere. And that's where my hope is, because I'm seeing them come forward. And my goal and the goal of what I do is just how do we push that amplification more, because the answer is on the continent and it's in the bosom of women.
And that's on the side of advocates and activists, but small business owners are also really important in telling this story and pushing that forward. Sindy, do you want to talk about some of the work that you've done with them?
Absolutely. As I was sharing with you when we were backstage about the work that we recently started doing with young entrepreneurs, with women farmers across the continent of Africa, and that's in relation to how do we move Africa forward. We know that at the current moment, there's a big wave and the talk about the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is definitely a tool that I believe as Africans, especially women, we should be right at the very forefront, because that agreement alone promises to take about 1.3 billion people out of poverty. But what we must also realize is that women are the stock exchange of Africa, because women are the ones who are in informal trade, but at the very same time, women are the ones who earn less, right? So when the work that we're doing, we're centered on ensuring that the very people that will move this Africa forward are the ones that are considered at the very top realm. And so we've invested our time where we're working with young people across 7 countries in the SADC region, but now we're moving into West Africa. We recently launched a $5 million fund, very ambitious, I know, over 2 years, but we hope that we're going to be able to achieve it, because as Danai was saying, we don't want to be looking at the West. We have everything that is in the continent. We have ourselves. And so if we do not put our foot forward to ensure that the work is done, then the work is not going to move anywhere. And so we're taking these entrepreneurs from the different countries within the continent and connecting them with their other peers across Africa to show them that we can together work and collaborate on this. But what exactly is this Africa Free Trade Agreement all about? How do we take it down from policy down to grassroots level so that they can take advantage of it? We're talking of free movement of persons. That's very important in addressing many of the issues we have in Africa. We're talking about tariffs, we're talking about money. And I find in the African context, we're very afraid to talk about money, but we need to talk about money. Because if we don't have investments, our leaders, ourselves, our communities, we need to invest in each other. And so we are spending the next 2 years doing road shows, visiting different communities, mainly in the rural areas, finding the young people, the entrepreneurs, but also the women groups that we can connect with and find out what is it that they would like to change and see in their communities. We're based in Toronto, Canada, but we're not bringing anything from Canada to say, we're telling the Africans this is what you need to do. We are asking them, how do you want to see Africa move forward? And we're investing in that by making sure that they are part of this fellowship that we've started and promoting those businesses and connecting SADC region to other regions in the continent and see how that's going to improve. And we've seen quite a significant number. We started with 12 women. I was telling Danai backstage when we launched the organization, and now we're over to 28,000 women that we work with. So for me, that's tremendous. Thank you.
So investing in women themselves and promoting that. Thank you so much. I think that's all the time we have for now, although I have many more questions for you.